Okay, so I do see that there are attendees.
Yeah.
Yay! And it's just that my my Zoom device was telling me there was no attendees, but that's obviously not true. There's lots of attendees. So welcome, everyone. I know that you can see us and hear us as a Zoom webinar. By definition, your cameras will not be functional and your mics will not work until the last 20 minutes or so when we have a question and answer session. If you have a question or a comment for the panelists, you can indicate that you do, and I'll let you talk. And so your mic will work at that time if you have a question or comment. We're very happy about this panel. We're very pleased to have with us three different alumni from PLU that graduated during different years, all with a degree in anthropology. And one of the silver linings of this whole pandemic thing and teaching classes via Zoom is that we're able to have people as panelists and attend these kinds of events easier with technology. You don't have to be in the Tacoma Parkland area to participate and learn together. So we're very pleased to have Reggie Collins, class of 2016, joining us from Portland, Oregon. Crystal Amundson, class of 2007, who lives in Tacoma but is currently in Oregon right now. And Emma Holm, class of 2017, who is in Flagstaff, Arizona. And so I'm not going to tell you about what they've been doing. The whole idea is that they tell you what they've been doing. And so we've asked them to talk about what they've been doing for work since graduation from PLU and how their backgrounds in anthropology has helped them to get work and helped inform what they've been doing since graduating from PLU. So they're each going to talk for about 10 minutes. Afterward, we'll have about 20 minutes or so for questions and answers and comments. And for all of our current students, if this is inspiring and you would like to explore options for a major or a minor, you can go ahead and send me a chat or send me an email, and I'm happy to follow up with you and talk to you about those options. All right? So without further ado, Reggie, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here on a Friday eve. My name again is Reggie Collins, graduating class of 2016, proud Loot. My younger sister is actually also a senior right now at PLU, as she is in the education department actually. But it's really great to be here and I'm excited to talk about Anthro. I kind of just wanted to touch on what I do. I am an assistant dean of admissions at Lewis and Clark College here in Portland, Oregon, and I have been working in higher ed pretty much since I graduated from PLU. And it's interesting to me because I started when I graduated working at the Boys and Girls Club. It was my college job. I worked in Tacoma. It was great. And one of my coworkers there left and went to work at another institution in Olympia, Washington called St. Martin's University. Very small college. It's Catholic. It's just lovely and just very like little, nice tight knit community, like 1,400 students, right? And so she called me and said, hey, there's an admissions job, you know, to help people go to college and recruit them, et cetera. And they kind of have some things they really want focus on. And one of those things was actually to travel to Eastern Washington often and recruit students. And so I actually had taken one class with Professor Levy, which was actually Peoples of Latin America. And also I did a lot of Hispanic studies classes while I was at PLU as well. And one of the big things is they wanted some, you know, some form of Spanish background because in Eastern Washington, there are a lot of native Spanish speakers and they're amazing students who are totally ready for college and going to go anywhere, can go anywhere they want, and their parents don't speak any English, and there's a lot of cultural differences. And so the first thing that helped me in my interview was just this term called cultural competency, which is something I have talked about many, many times in multiple interviews that I've had since then. And it's really about being competent about other cultures, aka, you know, being sensitive and understanding the differences between, the Western centric, mind that we might have. And so it was really cool for me to end up meeting many, many families from different parts of the world, not just from Latin America as well, working in admissions and traveling around the country, recruiting students. And one of the big things that helped, one of the big moments that I got to step up was actually, there are a lot of students in the Federated States of Micronesia, FSM. Maybe you might not know. They have a very unique uh, relationship with the United States, in terms of their, what their country's political stances. But what's so cool is there's all of these students that live there with very limited Wi-Fi and very, very awesome culture. And they needed someone to be the spokesperson for St. Martin's University, where I worked, that, would make sure that they were understanding of those things. And so it was a really cool option for me. And I took that on before I left. And I went, and now where I'm at Lewis and Clark College. So I would say cultural competency was the number one thing that I think was amazing. And one class I took with um, Akiko Nasaka was actually sickness, madness, and health. And that was a really great, and that is still on the curriculum. I went and looked, it's still great. So I don't know who teaches that now, but it was a great class. I was always interested in medicine anyway, but it was also about medicine with, in other cultures. And I still remember this book that we read in there called "The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down," and it talks a lot about, different medical practices and beliefs from different countries. It was the Hmong culture, and I just think from reading applications, which is another thing that I do in my job of reading college applications from all of you when you were probably high schoolers, doing the same thing. And sometimes it's amazing to know, how to understand difference, cultural difference specifically, when it comes to, a student's background and how they are approaching the college process in the United States of America. And both schools that I have worked at in the 4 years since I've graduated have pretty high numbers of international students as well. And so it is another big thing for me. So that's the number one thing I want to say, that I think anthropology does better than any department at PLU and at many colleges, is just teach you to actually, understand difference, and cherish it and respect it and admire it, and not just acknowledge it, as well. So the other thing I would just say is that just doing the schoolwork and the classes that I took, Catherine Wiley, I think she's on sabbatical, was my actual thesis professor. and and what's great about it was just deadlines and project management. If there's anything that you need to know about working in the adult life, is that you do have supervisors and you do need to meet with people. But for the most part, you're doing a lot of independent work. And I got that in my upper level classes at PLU. I'm not working I'm not doing anthropological research now in my job. But I do have to go to my boss, the dean or the VP or the president, and say, how is this project that I've been working on by myself for, a few weeks, of bringing high school counselors to campus, or working on a scholarship for underrepresented minorities? These type of projects that I have worked on, a lot of the times I've had a lot of independent work with some guidance. And I do think that's how upper division courses are at PLU. And I felt like it was really, really good, for giving me project management skills when I was an upperclassman as well. And then the final piece I would say is just, I wrote two words down of just xenophobia. It just, I think it really keeps you from being egocentric of the United States or of Western mindset, and just and having xenophobic tendencies. I think I'm just so much better at actually genuinely, caring about other cultures, from learning about so many different cultures and people from all over the country. And now when I meet those students on campus, or parents, of students, of high schoolers, I can kind of develop a rapport and say, oh yeah, I know about Aruba. Actually, I learned about that. I learned about Mauritania when I was in high school, or Bangladesh. And I meet someone from those places, I can like instantly say, oh yeah, I know about that. I know the capital of that country. I know some of the traditions in that country. I think it's helped me a lot more in my adult life than I anticipated, just being exposed to so many other cultures academically, and really diving deep into them when I was in my classes, you know, as an undergrad. And I think I'm really grateful to have that, because it does kind of set me apart in one, an interview setting, and two, you know, once I have a job, when I meet people, and when my job is to influence them to go attend my university, which is nowhere near as good as PLU. Obviously, I would never. Of course, Lewis and Clark is way inferior. But what's great is it's truly a nice advantage to have, to be able to genuinely have knowledge about where someone is from, versus, you know, not know, just when someone says, oh, I'm from this country, and you just have no clue what that is. I think I rarely fall prey to that, just because of all the exposure I had, in the anthro department. So yeah, I think I'll be answering questions later, but I think that's everything I had to say. So thank you guys for listening.
Well, thank you, Reggie, and we'll hold our applause and we'll answer questions at the very end. But thank you very much. Next up, we have Crystal.
Hi. Just wanted to echo Reggie's comment about The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. That's an incredible book. And it's been very useful for me in my careers too. So I prepared something, and I'll be reading a little, but I'll try not to drone on too long. So good evening, and thank you for having me at this important event. And special thank you to the Anthropology Department, Professor Levy, and Dr. Nosaka and Dr. Andrews. I studied archaeology and anthropological theory with Dr. Andrews, and anthropology of age with Dr. Nosaka during my time at PLU. My name is Crystal Amundsen, and I graduated in the class of 2007, which doesn't seem that long ago now. And I'm from our neighboring town of Puyallup, Washington, born and raised. And I'm the mother of a 6th-generation Pierce County resident. So we have a long family history here on my maternal side. A little bit more about my background at PLU is that my Lutheran grandma on my paternal side was very pleased that I attended. And I chose to major in anthropology after taking Dr. Klein's course on gender and cross-cultural perspective. I also studied the history of the Civil War and Reconstruction, and I minored in history and religion. Before I understood the power of collective impact and people's assemblies, I loved the beauty and healing nature of choirs and sang with the university singers, university chorale, and the opera workshop. During my senior year, I mentored with Dr. Andrews for the Society of American Archaeology Conference in Austin, Texas. And Dr. Andrews supervised my research, and I presented my paper and moderated the session. One summer at PLU, I served as lab assistant for the Dr. Grill collection of Papua New Guinea artifacts and learned more about the history and culture and music there. Additional highlights of my experience include serving as teacher's assistant with Dr. Andrews' Anthropology 101 Physical Biological Anthropology course. And I was also teacher's assistant for the Endangered Languages course at Nia Bay, and served as the anthropology tutor for the university my senior year. During my time at PLU, I worked at Tacoma General Hospital, Multicare Tacoma General Hospital, on the women and newborn floor. And my studies in anthropology helped me serve our diverse population of patients due to holistic and comparative cultural, linguistic, and religious studies. After graduating, I transitioned to a career working as an insurance claims investigator. And my role was to complete field work and work independently, inspect and document field sites and property, negotiate and pay settlements. And my archaeological training with Dr. Andrews and my time in the lab helped prepare me for forensic science, claims investigations, physical inspections, scene investigations, and documentation. Anthropological methodologies, including key informant interviews, studies prepared me for conducting insurance interviews and statements. And in 2015, I started working for our local health department in the chronic disease prevention program. And this work has a special place in my heart due to my family's health history. It was the beginning of a 5-year career in public and population health. And in 2017, I began serving in the office of the director. My current role includes serving as board clerk alternate on our local legislative body, the Tacoma-Pierce County Board of Health. And my regular business includes promoting health equity, transformative policy, and quality improvement. Due to COVID-19, I've been activated by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, to serve on our continuity of ongoing operations team while the department partners with other jurisdictions to respond to the pandemic. COVID-19 has starkly highlighted institutional racism and health disparities in our healthcare system and other sectors of society. Then the George Floyd protests all over Tacoma and the world prompted another local FEMA response. The department activated the Racism and Resilience Action Response Team, and I currently serve there as planning chief. Some of our objectives include developing and innovating public health science, policy, systems, and environmental changes to respond to racism as a public health crisis, and to become actively anti-racist organization. Our team will be the first West Coast team to participate in a Resilience Catalyst cohort with Dr. Wendy Ellis from George Washington University in partnership with NACCHO, the National Association of City and County Health Officials. And the history of this work is that it will be long-term and require large-scale civic engagement and individual and community resilience. Over the years, I've been attending protests at the ICE Northwest Detention Center, and this summer I joined the Marches for Racial Equity, deepened my intentional allyship with Black, Indigenous people of color, and protested extrajudicial killings and institutionalized racist police violence. To keep strong and regularly renew myself, I intentionally partner with various faith communities to make music and promote interfaith dialogue to promote building community resilience. I volunteer in 2 faith communities as a music minister in Tacoma, and I actively participate in civic engagement, including campaigning, voting, protest, and marching. And I just want to thank you for honoring me with your time, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's hard for me to keep my applause and my questions until the end, but all right. And next up, we have Emma Holm.
All right, yeah, so my name's Emma Holm, and I graduated in 2017. I had the pleasure of taking an IHON class that was very anthropologically focused with Dr. Levy. And that was really one of my first introductions to anthropological theory, which has really gotten me thinking a lot as I've been moving forward after graduation and into what I'm doing right now. And I also, while I was at PLU, had the opportunity to work very closely with Dr. Andrews as the biological anthropology teaching assistant for several semesters, and also on 2 research projects based off of archaeological collections from Mount Rainier National Park. And I did an analysis of 4 different sites. 3 of them are within the park boundaries and 1 of them is outside of the boundaries. And that was presented at the local Northwest Anthropological Conference. And then I also, my senior year in 2017, presented a paper about a site in the northeast quadrant of the park and a specific artifact that was kind of, was found that was very deep. It was probably maybe, it was found in sediments that are from before Mount Mazama blew, which was Crater Lake, so dating back to about 7,000 years-ish. And so it was very like exciting that this was within the park's archaeological resources. So those are some of like the highlights that I had. And another element of what I did was an internship with Mount Rainier during 2016 that was coordinated through the department. And so that then helped me kind of transition after graduation into working as an archaeology technician. And so what I'm interested in doing ultimately is working as an archaeologist for a land management agency, such as the Forest Service or the National Park Service or the BLM. And so I transitioned after graduating into a seasonal archaeology position working at Mount Rainier. But I'll also put out there, like I worked for 2 years, and then right now I am a second-year master's student at Northern Arizona University, working on my degree in applied archaeology with the intention of going into the federal workforce as an archaeologist. So the key thing is to have both a combination of work experience and the education. So trying to find the sweet spot there. So after I graduated, like I was saying, then I worked for the park for 6 months. That's like a temporary position. They're called temporary positions. You can work for 1,039 hours as a temporary employee. And while I was at the park, we were doing a lot of compliance projects. And that basically is referring to like any construction activity that's getting federal money, basically has to make sure that it's not going to be disrupting any archaeological resources or cultural resources more broadly in the process. So a lot of the Park Service does that type of work in-house. And so we were monitoring construction like at Sunrise, where they were digging trenches for solar panels. And then they were doing the renovation of the Paradise Inn Annex while I was there. So we were watching as the crews were removing a ton of soil from underneath that building. And there are tons of artifacts from the early 20th century. So that was kind of what I did for the summer of 2017. And then during the off seasons, I worked doing like contract archaeology for private companies, which is again, meeting that legal kind of check mark is that there are specific companies that hire archaeologists to meet that component. So in those positions, I was mostly digging shovel probes, looking for artifacts and screening the materials, or there was a little bit of construction monitoring. And then during the summers of 2018 and 2019, I worked for the Forest Service. I worked for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest 2018 and the Plumas National Forest, which is in Northern California, in 2019, before starting school in last August. In 2000, at the Okanagan-Wenatchee, which is on the east side of the Cascades, I was specifically on a project that was doing a National Environmental Policy Act pedestrian survey, which is basically, we also did some of that at Mount Rainier, where you're basically just walking transects across the terrain looking for archaeological sites. And so did not find a whole lot of archaeology that summer, but I did find 39 mylar balloons and a lot of mushrooms, which kind of goes to show that I was really looking for anything that I could find to keep me entertained as we just kept walking. But it was really good overall and really rewarding. And I'm in a class right now in school that's teaching me about that law, the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's really been an eye-opening experience to know what I was actually a part of that summer and then how it actually fits into the big bureaucratic world. And then in 2019, I was working for the Forest Service again, and we were mostly monitoring sites to see what their current condition was before, which is basically like you'd go out to, you revisit it and you take the existing site record and kind of see if the conditions changed. And that was in preparation for upcoming timber sales or controlled burns. And so right now though, I'm in, like I said, my master's program. I should be graduating next May. And I think that anthropology and the theoretical orientation that the department at PLU takes, and just like the entire university's like essence of like, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life, has really gotten me thinking about why I wanted to come to NAU. It has a very strong indigenous archaeology presence. And what I think that I'm very interested in doing is understanding like what archaeology as it's practiced in cultural resource management, which is like what I will be doing as a land management agency, like does, like what is its bigger cultural implications, because archaeological resources have can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different communities based on what based on their cultural context or their personal ontologies. So my project is going back to Mount Rainier. And so as an applied student, I did an internship project. And so it's based on Ohanapakash, and it's the hot springs area there. There was a resort that was operated from about the 1920s until 1961. But the hot springs were also a known resource to the Tagnapon Native Americans and other tribes. And so that narrative is not really brought forth. And so what I've been doing is preparing a presentation for the park that is working with the tribe and working on proposing a restoration project of those hot springs for traditional use, and expanding the existing special use permit for the tribe there, and trying to kind of juxtapose the the traditional Native American cultural presence there against the hot springs resort history, to kind of broaden the narrative that is being interpreted there. So that's kind of what I have to share. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks to everybody. And we're going to open it up for questions and answers right now. I'd like to open it up for the audience first, and then I'll also have some closing remarks of my own at the very end. So let me see, bear with me. There's a way for me to do that here on Zoom. Let's see. All right. First question. I'm going to read the questions because I don't think the panelists can see them, or can you? I'll read the question for everybody to hear it, and then the panelists can answer it however they do. So this is for Emma, actually. Is there any particular area you would like to explore as an archaeologist outside of the US? And if so, why?
That's a great question. Well, this is not really, I need to think a little bit about like looking forward to what I want to do. But what I did do was a project in Romania that was a bioarchaeology project, which is the study of human remains. And that was an excavation of a 11th century Christian cemetery. So that was an interesting experience because bioarchaeology is, because of Native American beliefs surrounding human remains, is not something that's really practiced in the United States, at least in the capacity that it is overseas. So that was a pretty interesting and unique experience. I really like North American archaeology. Like, I think that we have a lot going on here, and I have a lifetime ahead to like understand all of the different facets of whether it's Euro-American settler or Native American. So I don't know. It's a great thing for me to think about, but I don't have a great answer for that.
Other questions for any of our panelists? Let's see, got some coming in here. Okay, so this is to any panelist can answer it, or we can have all three answer it. Um, what would your advice be for tips on looking for jobs in search engines and such? Just putting in anthropology doesn't really result in a whole lot of jobs, uh, but there are clearly things that one can do with an anthropology degree. So whoever would like to answer that.
I think maybe Crystal would go first on this one, and then I can follow. Maybe.
Um, well, I know for me, I recently took a course on LinkedIn and they recommended having at least 400 connections, and kind of did an intro on how to create a profile. So just learning about how to use that platform may be helpful with networking, and then activating your own social network with the department and the professors and your classmates, family, friends, anybody that's really in the community that fits with where you're trying to go. Definitely getting to know people and having a referral or some kind of introduction can be helpful as well. And then internships are another good way.
I just wanted to point out, for me working in higher education, I was really focused on diversity and inclusion jobs, or jobs that really focused on equity. And it just so happened that I was familiar with college because I was in college, and I really thought I didn't realize there were so many jobs in higher ed, and there is a website called higheredjobs.com. And I still get emails from them all the time with job openings. So I think a lot of people don't realize how many staff positions there are at every institution in the country. And so it is a good way to find jobs that you might not have even thought you were interested in the higher ed field as well. That was just the higher ed plug there.
Okay. Another question has come up through text. I should mention, by the way, you can keep texting questions. If you would like to use the mic instead, you can also, there's a way to like wave, and then I will allow you to speak with the mic if you would like to. I should say that. My Zoom capabilities are still developing here. But here's another question in the meantime for Reggie. It says, so cool that you are familiar with FSM. I have a couple of SFM friends at St. Martin's. My country is in the region of Micronesia and neighbors of FSM, with Micronesians being less than other immigrant groups, less known than other immigrant groups. How has anthropology equipped you to make these students feel seen in the community, in their US campus?
Yeah, it's a great question. That's so awesome to hear. I wonder, I would really like to know what island you're actually from. A lot of the students that ended up going to St. Martin's when I worked there were actually from Yap or Chuuk, were the islands. And for me, I think, there is just, and we can all be honest, there's just blatant ignorance in this country in general about other countries in general, immigrant groups overall. So for me, I think so many things that I learned, in a lot of the courses that I took, uh, just equip me to be receptive. I think and I think that was the biggest thing when I talked to students at a small institution, because I had the ability to. How to make them feel seen. Sometimes other students didn't always make them feel seen, and as a staff member, it was just cool for me to, because I always was inquiring in my classes, to just say, hey, what is it like growing up in Yap? What are some of the major religions there? What are a lot of students might not actually ask those questions, and I was always very intrigued, because obviously I got used to always inquiring about new cultures and new countries throughout my entire time at PLU. So I think as a staff member, I felt the responsibility to inquire about their lives and if they were homesick, because I felt homesick, and I grew up in Kent. I was 30 minutes away from PLU, so I can imagine if you're 9 hours away with a 9-hour time zone difference, how different it is. But yeah, many of the students were yappies, and they were really cool. They were awesome. Every single student was one of the most wholesome, polite people that we had at St. Martin's my entire time. So.
All right, a couple more have come on in, so I'm gonna I don't know which one came in first, but let's see. Okay, I'm curious. This is for all the panelists. Anyone can answer this, or a couple of you if you want to trade off. It says, I'm curious to know more about how your backgrounds in anthropology has affected your lives outside of work. Could you please speak a little bit to that?
I'm happy to hop in on this one too. Just the biggest thing for me is, and again, Dr. Nasaka's course, one of them I took was on East Asian cultures. And after about 6 months of working full time at St. Martin's, I saved up and I went to Japan for 14 days with some of my closest friends. I think maybe, and a lot of my friends were like, Japan is not, I think a lot of people might think you will go to Europe or you go to Australia, or it was interesting to me that so many people wouldn't think of that as their first place to go, but it was an amazing trip for me. I was supposed to go to Peru and check out some ruins there. Speaking of ruins, I wanted to go to Machu Picchu. I have it all paid for. We were going to go in July, and now we have to wait. That was all BC before COVID. But yeah, I think the big thing for me is that my interest in traveling and exploring the world, I think is hugely affected by and that's all outside of work. It's just my personal time. I want to spend my free time when I'm not working traveling, and I think Anthro was a big way to like spur my interest there.
Would any of the other panelists like to comment about anthropology in kind of their non-work lives?
I think it gets me thinking a lot about what causes the situations I see in my life. Like, what are the processes that are at play, and what are the consequences of those processes? I'm in a class right now that I never had the opportunity to take Dr. Nasaka's class, but I'm in one right now that's called Language, Power, and Medicine. That's all about like how linguistic anthropology is used as a lens for understanding how the medical field interacts with its patients, and it looks at that in lots of different facets, and it's all about the processes. And so I think that has been really informative in my world, is like understanding archaeology too, and like what archaeology as a process, as it's practiced, is its consequences. So like those are like related to my professional life, but at the same time it like is impacting me a lot in a personal level right now. So
thank you. So here's another question. Actually, this one's for Emma also. So kind of along those lines, what kinds of internships would someone who wants to go into archaeology, what kinds of internships might you look for?
that's a great question. Look for ones that are not so internships or field schools. If you're wanting, field school is a must. I don't know where you are in this process, but field school you have to do that. And I would say whether you're doing a field school or an internship, trying to find ones that involve survey work will be a really marketable skill rather than just excavation, because excavation usually just happens if an archaeological site like can't be avoided in CRM, or like if you're excavating for as a part of a university. But so internships or field schools that have a survey component, whether that's pedestrian survey or subsurface survey, would be very valuable.
Okay, and here is one for any panelist could answer this. And there's certainly lots of super interesting things with anthropology careers. Was there anything like on the job, kind of day to day, that you maybe found kind of not as interesting, or anything that you just didn't like about any of the jobs you've had?
I'll just throw this in there. You find very little archaeology a lot of the time. That's the reality. You dig a lot of holes and you screen a lot of dirt and you don't find anything, or you can walk a long ways and you don't find anything. But that's kind of what the reality is if you're not in academia. So that's you have to love it, or like love being outdoors, or love the physical activity of it, and then like when you do have those moments of finding something, it really makes it all worth it. But there's a lot of time that you're not necessarily doing what you might imagine you would be as an archaeologist.
And then here's another one for Reggie specifically. While working over in Eastern Washington, were there any scholarship programs that have been established for those working in orchids?
Orchards, maybe?
Oh, sorry.
Orchards?
Orchards.
Orchards, yep, it probably is, yeah.
That might have been what the person meant, orchards, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a big thing, and I'm sure Dr. Levy knows a lot about this too. I mean, a big thing in Washington that is great is that we have what is called WACA, which is basically DACA, but for Washington students, students and their families who are undocumented. And so a lot of migrant workers can happen to be undocumented. So there is a scholarship. I will say that when I moved to Oregon, and St. Martin's did this really well, but when I moved to Oregon, we were not able to we were not able to give any students who were, from migrant families any extra aid. And now this year, in the first year, my third year at Lewis and Clark, we finally have scholarships offered that we're going to give to students who are undocumented, a very limited number. And so it does depend on state, I think is a big thing, because state policies will dictate whether or not that students who are undocumented family can get extra aid. So a plug to register to vote if you're over 18.
All right, here's another one for anybody. Anyone can answer this, any panelist. As anthropology graduates, were there any classes at PLU that you wish you had taken but weren't able to take? And if so, which ones? I'm guessing that's.
So there was a anthropology and magic course that I never got a chance to take, and I always was so interested in that one.
Is there a certain aspect of that you think may have, I don't know, informed what you do, or was it just kind of exploratory, or?
I think just the idea of looking at magic through a cross-cultural lens and examining different worldviews and comparing them, and then trying to figure out what that would look like, and how discussions in that would go. Just really intriguing to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mine would be the class on macaw culture. I always wanted to learn more about Nia Bay. My first roommate as a freshman was actually from Nia Bay, from the reservation, and he took me there over summer break or something, and it was amazing. It was a really eye-opening, great experience, but I never got to actually take a course to learn about it, academically.
Okay. Other questions from the audience? And I'll keep it open for a little bit. If there are any other questions, you can feel free to text, or if you want to use your microphone, I can allow you to do that too. I'm hoping that nobody is having their hand up, but I don't know how to see it, because that's a possibility.
one at the bottom of the question and answer.
Okay.
I'm raising my hand.
You are. And I didn't see that. So it's possible that you might just have to text your question in because I can handle. But here's one that came in. Okay, this is interesting. Has there been any time in your career where you found a use for your degree in anthropology that you initially didn't think you would ever have to use, basically? Crystal, you want to give it a shot?
So in my previous career working in insurance, I often found myself in negotiations, and negotiations can kind of go however they just go. It depends on who's in the room and what the stakes are, and there's a lot of factors that go into negotiations, but I guess I'll say that having skill sets around listening and participant observation were helpful. Also, cultural relativism, the ability to just kind of take a pause, take a stock of a situation, come back, reevaluate and get a dialogue going. Those kinds of things were really helpful.
That reminds me of one of the comments that I have, and I'll save that till toward the end. There's a few more questions coming in, actually, just this one's kind of just a shout out to Reggie from Carol Ramos. We met at my sister's wedding.
Just last week. Oh my gosh, we totally did meet last week. Hi, Charlie. That's what she has. What part of archaeology did you find very important? Is that her question there?
Yeah, and then the second part. Yeah.
That's probably for Emma, actually.
Yeah.
In the chat.
Yeah, it's for Reggie, but then it's about archaeology. I guess I can rephrase it. How about that?
Yeah.
What is the part of archaeology you find most intriguing?
I think what's most intriguing to me is that there are multiple things that the past can, different things can mean different things. You can tell, depending on what approach you're taking to the archaeological record, you can get different information out of it. So I think that the idea that there's not just one absolute truth about the past is pretty amazing, and it's just all dependent on what type of approach you're bringing to your analysis. So that's kind of been a really fun thing to kind of explore and get to know during PLU and since graduating.
Okay, this is actually more of a comment, but I'll just announce it. This person, Casey Gardner, unless there's another question with that, Casey. Casey says, I'm double majoring in religion and intend to go to grad school for medical anthropology specifically. I would love to connect with you after this if I can have your email address. So yes, Casey, I will pass on email addresses of the panelists, and I'll leave it to you all to connect afterward. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Other questions? Question for Emma. How do archaeologists decide where to excavate, where to start digging?
Well, that's a good question.
I get curious about this myself, Emma.
Yeah, Crystal, too, you've had some experience. If you want to add anything, you're more than welcome to. I can probably best answer that from a cultural resource management perspective rather than if you're going and doing like PhD research or that's what you're doing as a professor. But for excavation, that kind of is like the last resort of the archaeological process. What you do is you'll like go out and you'll do what they call surveying, and if you're digging holes a lot of times to look and seeing what you come across, and that is going to be based on the area of potential effect for the proposed project. So like when I was working at Mount Rainier, they were replacing the wastewater system at the Ohanapekosh campground. And so we had to go in and dig holes where they were going to be removing soil to put in like a new lift station, which is like the pump basically. So we were specifically digging where there was going to be ground disturbance. And in a couple of situations when I was an intern, we found sites, but there was nothing when I was there that set off the scale that something needed to be excavated. A lot of times excavation will then happen if like a site is found during that survey phase, if the construction project plans can't be changed, and the only solution is to mitigate it by removing the archaeological site.
All right, this next question is specifically for Crystal. Because Crystal, you mentioned anti-racist practices. This question is if you've seen any anti-racist practices being implemented since the protests over the killing of George Floyd, and if so, what are they? And then what do you, Crystal, what do you think still needs to happen?
So I do know that there are some efforts going on at the City of Tacoma, anti-racist efforts, and then also at the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. In June, the board passed a resolution committing to anti-racism as an organization. So those are two local examples that I can think of off the top of my head. And what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, what steps need to be taken basically to try to further dismantle institutional racism?
So that's a big question, and I'm not the expert, but I'll give you my couple of opinions that I can think of here. I think it's pretty clear that there are some very scientific, if you will, policy decisions that we absolutely can make, right? That's the cut and dry of it. Where it gets a little dicier is when you get into finding the political will to make those policy decisions. So for me, personally, I invest a lot of my time working, as I mentioned before, volunteering in community and faith communities, and just trying to build dialogue with people, especially around belief systems and ideologies and worldviews, because it seems that that's one of the places that the work will be, in addition to the actual policy changing that needs to happen at the legislative level. There's the heart work, right? And I think that as a society, we're kind of at a place where we're evolving and adapting to respond to what that work will look like, and we're not there yet, but we're in the midst of it, right? Or it feels that way to me. So I guess I'd say I think that there's a lot of heart work that needs to be done. There's a lot of restorative justice that needs to take place. Cultural humility is a huge place for white people to begin, and specifically for white people examining allyship and examining white fragility. Those are important steps. So if you're not familiar with those terms, it's worth getting educated.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Crystal. Okay, this next question is rather specific. I don't know if I mean, you can give it a shot. Whoever can may have experience with this. But this next question says, there seems to be a big cultural divide between Native Americans and Caucasian Americans on and near reservations, especially in Eastern Washington. Do any of you have any experiences in navigating these things or doing research about them?
I would just concur with that. I don't really have any insights, but I'm in an Indian law class right now too that's using case studies between Washington State and the tribes there. So yeah, it's an issue.
Well, Emma, while we have you, this next question is for you specifically. What do you think was the most interesting artifacts you've ever found during your fieldwork or your digs?
Oh, I could have seen that question coming.
Archaeologists get asked this a lot, right? Right, Emma?
Very true. You should just have the canned answer. I found when I was working actually for the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest, I found a biface. So that's like an artifact that's been worked on. It's a tool that's been worked on both sides. And it was within a known archaeological site, but it wasn't a part of that site record. And so it was also in the middle of a off-road road, not like the main forest roads, but a four-wheel one. So that was exciting for me. Probably several hundred years, at least several hundred years old.
So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. There's one more question that came up just now, and then I've got some closing comments too. I think this last question is actually kind of timely as kind of a way to kind of close this panel. It says, what drew you to anthropology initially? Was there a moment, perhaps in any of your experiences at PLU or a certain class, which you decided, yes, I want to major in anthropology?
For me, I mean, I came into PLU actually wanting to go to medical school as well. Believe it or not, I wanted to be an optometrist. So I was taking a lot of anatomy, a lot of calculus, chemistry, and I got to and I had also taken for the gen eds a class from a professor who I think had retired, and I can't remember her name now, but she was for a linguistics class, and it was one of the most fun, exciting classes I ever had taken. And I was like, it was great, it was really fun, but I'm gonna follow this path. And then I got to organic chemistry, and I was also taking cultural anthropology, and organic chemistry was like really difficult for me, and it was a real struggle, something that I was not expecting. And I just realized that the classes that were the most interesting to me and the classes that I felt like I was passionate about actually studying the content were the anthropology classes. And my goal was to actually teach English abroad. I wanted to travel immediately to East Asia or Spain or something, or Latin America. And that was my plan. And I was going to do that. And then I got a job in higher ed, and, you know, things turn out totally different than you think. But that was kind of my goal, was to teach English abroad once I had decided anthro was it. But it was kind of just like, I just want to enjoy my classes and be passionate about what I'm learning. And I wasn't getting that from the STEM field.
And I'll let the other two panelists answer this also if they would like to.
I came into PLU knowing that I wanted to go into archaeology. So I think that the classes that I took kind of just reaffirmed that it was and broadened my understanding of what anthropology and archaeology actually is, and how archaeology is just not even anything close to Indiana Jones. And yeah, so I kind of came in with an understanding, but I left with a much greater one.
I think for me, from a very young age, I just really wanted to understand why the world was the way that it was. And if I look deeper at that, I think it comes down to kind of an internal part of me that was trying to understand conflict resolution. I didn't have the words for it at that time, but just, you know, looking at people around us, and sometimes you see things and you're just, what, you know, boy, did it have to go that way, you know, things like that. And so I try to understand, well, what makes us do what we do, you know, and then that kind of brought me to anthropology. And I mean, I don't think that you can never really know everything of why we do what we do, but I just loved every aspect of anthropology, from cultural anthropology to linguistics to biological anthropology to archaeological to applied. It was just amazing. So anyway, I'll stop nerding out, but yes.
In closing, just a quick reminder that is to all of our current students, if you would like to explore options in either a minor or a major, please email me, or you could email any of the other professors in the department. We're all happy to talk with you about these requirements and the options for classes that you can take. So I'll throw that out there. In thinking about what all the three panelists have offered with their experiences, I find striking how diverse their interests are and what they've done since PLU, right? And yet they do have certain underlining characteristics and things in common. All three of these alumni, regardless of what they've gone into for work, are drawing upon lessons from the discipline and certain skill sets from the discipline. Cultural competency, the ability to work with diverse populations, right? Know something about their history, know something about their culture. The importance of striving for anti-racism and dismantling institutional racism, really kind of just an awareness of injustice in our United States society. That's something that anthropology students are good at recognizing and figuring out how to navigate, how to deal with cultural difference. But even things like holism, right? I've heard some stories, Bennett, about how holism, this anthropological perspective, has influenced what you do. And overall, I've been struck by how these skills and lessons can help you to get the job, right? They can help you to design the cover letter and the resume. And you might have to kind of, be creative, right? You might not be hired as Parkland's anthropologist, but you're certainly getting jobs with anthropology. And then the skills and the lessons of the discipline help you to do the job well, right? So as Reggie was saying, I mean, one thing is to get the job, right? But then from there, you have to think about, well, how do I actually do this well and enjoy myself while doing it? So thank you all. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you, Reggie, for joining us today. We're really, in the department, we're all very proud of you and we're very appreciative of your time. So now we can all clap. And I'm sure that all the attendees are clapping, even if I can't hear them. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. All right, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.